Next, let's shift to a different posture. This time we're going to jab and then switch on the spot to a guard position in the opposite stance like this. Don't do anything fancy with the arms, just maintain bow, move them in line with the body, and don't do any kind of affected movement. I shouldn't need to keep reminding absolute basics at this point, but nevertheless remember, keep some curvature in the body. This is what we mean by stored force. See the curvature of the arm, and that gives us the ability to extend the punch if we need to, and this is what we mean by storing force in the body, like a spring ready to go. Let's watch for a minute and also listen. Remember to listen to the timing and learn from that. Now, let's take a closer look at the footwork. The lead leg pulls back and the back leg floats forwards, hence this is called a floating route. The body does not move forward but stays on the spot. It's a fast movement and it's also risky. You could be swept or pushed over while doing this. But don't worry, it's just a training exercise. For now, we're just going to use it to extend our understanding of higher level movement and worry about the practicalities later. So our first movement is just the standard Yiquan jab, lifting up on the lead foot using a pivot route, and then when we change, watch carefully what the rear foot does as it comes through to the front. Note that the pivot route lifts our body weight up and slightly to the back, and that means to make this posture work we've got to raise our weight a little bit, so just do a little bit of a jump, watch carefully, springs up the weight and the lead foot comes through and lands on the side of the ball of the foot on the outside. Watch again carefully. Next, notice that we use a retreating triangle step with a true finish. That means that we end up facing forwards rather than out on an angle like you would normally do if you were practicing retreating Mo Sabu. We normally call this a crescent step. It's a subtle crescent of the lead leg. The lead leg is making a subtle crescent and the rear foot kicks forward straight. It's a subtle movement, so watch carefully. Now let's add the lead punch back in and start bringing it back up to full speed and power. Notice the structure, notice the lock point, notice the movement, notice the combination when movement, fluidity and lock points all link together. These are ultimately the core movement principles that we're trying to unite, structure and fluidity. And these will go on after standing and slow movement to become the second stage building blocks of our actual practical movement skills. The essence of each one's unique physical movement paradigm. These are what we will bring into live training, and I know there's a situation currently where there are Yiquan instructors who cannot demonstrate any kind of application or transition from this knowledge. In fact, in many cases they don't have this knowledge, but even where they do, it's incredibly difficult for them to transition into the next stage. Rather than just criticizing that, we're going to help them. We're going to do videos that show how they can build their confidence and build these skills into the sparring stage. But for now, we need to understand that there is a transition, there is a point to this. And in fact, if you don't understand the practical use, then you can't reverse engineer back to why the method is what it is, why we are training in the way that we are training and what we're training for. Now watch the complete posture. Okay, instead of shifting into the guard, now let's change the finishing posture to another jab. That is, what was the backhand becomes a jab. This is called an illusion jab. Performed jab to jab, we can see that this has the timing 1-2. Now, let's compare this with a stepping forward illusion jab, like this. Notice immediately that the posture seems slower, even if we count it as 1-2. Nevertheless, the tempo is slower. It's also less powerful. What we're seeing here is a precise example of how the lesser road and higher road in Wang Xiangjai's terms function. That is, two different uses of the laws of physics are in play. In the step-in illusion punch, the posture seems larger. It certainly covers more distance. Some body weight or compensatory force is added into the punch. This is the lesser road, body weight in dull motion compensating for lack of power generated by speed. However, the on-the-spot jab actually contains a similar amount of volume in the special sense that this is used in Yiquan, even though it looks like a smaller movement. Look, as the front foot comes back, the back foot moves forward. This is the principle of shifting where the volume of a movement is, back into the articulation of the body in some way so that it is still there, but the movement itself appears to be much smaller, but it's just an illusion. Most importantly, the on-the-spot illusion jab is a bigger Fa Li. Look, as the step-in illusion jab is performed, most of the step is actually quite slow. The Fa Li is performed right at the last second. It is, in effect, an on-the-spot normal jab. Aside from adding a little bit of body weight, the step-in doesn't feed very much into the Fa Li. And note the size of the Fa Li here. It's half the physical volume as the on-the-spot illusion jab. See? The on-the-spot illusion jab begins with the shoulders shifting round the central axis, or the spine in the old way of describing things. Actually, the central axis is a principle of physics and is only approximately in the location of the spine. The movement spins the body round on its axis, a movement then added to in phased momentum by the hips and the legs. But the phase is so fast it's hard to see with the naked eye. The entire movement is performed explosively. Even though the movement is smaller than the step-in illusion jab, nevertheless it's more powerful. This is just the laws of physics. Velocity is more effective than just dead weight moving forward relatively slowly. Okay, now let's take a closer look at some of the technical differences. The jab is set differently to just moving forwards with the guard, and for that reason the foot is much more in a pivot style route. You can see that it lifts up. It's very much like the traditional empty stance that we see in Shaolin Wushu and other kinds of Chinese martial arts. The foot placement would change slightly, by the way, depending on what kind of posture you were doing with the lead hand, but in this case it's a jab, so we want it to stabilise the posture. We want it to lift us up slightly because that creates more volume in the overall posture. And we also want to release the structure so that it can turn more efficiently and more comfortably into the jab. So it lifts us up, turns us around a little bit to the side, and that's much more conducive to the Fa Li for the jab. Those who don't really understand setting will always think in terms of Xing Yiquan, that the set should be on the front foot, and that will make them prejudice against a front foot pivot route. In fact, in this posture, one of the things that lifting up on the pivot route does is help you set it on the rear foot. But we've looked at all of that in the beginner's series.